Hello, Endersword here again, this time with a Gold League game. This was posted by CarDien on the TeamLiquid.net strategy forums. He was looking for some advice and wondering how he ended up losing this game. So we're going to take a look at this for him today. His opponent is going to be Becksson, the Zerg player over on the left-hand side of the map. They are both Gold League, I believe, but this, you'll notice, is obviously a custom game, not a ladder game, given that they're orange and green. I do, in this game, have on the Strong Team Colors mod, so some of you may notice a difference between that and the normal one. I just kind of like the way that it looks, making the accents for the team colors stand out a lot more. I've only been using it for a day or so, but I actually like it. So the three key things that we're going to look at during this game are, number one, constant production is absolutely key. This refers to both SCV production, your worker production throughout the entire game, as well as your unit production during the game. And so we'll look at certain slips in that over the course of this as both players kind of macro up and see ultimately the result that happens between the worker gap that they actually get to, and see what the difference is in the size of the armies at the point that they can actually engage. Second thing we're going to look at is the idea of basing your attack on information that you've either gathered from what your opponent is doing or information based on your own timings, your own tech path, and certain timings that you want to hit. Maybe you want to attack when stim is done, maybe you want to attack when +1 is done, something like that. So your attack should not really be just kind of arbitrary, I think I'm big enough, I'm going to push out now. It should definitely be based on what you've scouted and what you are doing back at home that is kind of informing your decisions. Third thing that we're going to look at is positioning and reinforcement in order to win battles. Obviously, for Terran versus Zerg, there's a lot of things that are based on positioning, that you want to make sure your tanks are spread out in the back, your forces, your bio army spread out in the front so that they're not vulnerable to a lot of baneling hits, things like that. It can be your initial positioning and the angle of attack that you're actually going at that can completely determine your success. Also, the reinforcements streaming in behind your main army. There are a lot of times that we see the reinforcements truly win the battle and hold a position as opposed to the main force. Now, into the game itself, what we're seeing here initially is him going for a fast command center, and he actually cut a SCV in order to be able to get this down quicker. There's kind of a lack in judgment on that, in that you want to be getting the SCVs out as quickly as possible because they're going to be mining the whole time. If you're delaying the command center to get an SCV, you're going to end up with more net minerals at the end of it than if you get the command center quicker and then cut the SCV to do it. Yes, the command center will then get in position and be able to produce another SCV quicker on that end, but that's 2 or 3 minutes later than if you had just gotten the SCV up front. So you can cut other forms of production, like maybe adding barracks or something, to get the command center down quicker, but try not to cut actual workers in order to aid your expansion. Generally, you want that production to be coming out very steady, because with the additional command center, you're going to get paid on the back end of it, whereas just by producing the workers, you're going to get that going up front. We've got 2 gases going now. He probably should be thinking about adding add-ons to this and start getting his tech going, but is just getting a few Marines out at the same time. So he's doubled up on gas, went for both refineries at the same time, and is mining out of them at max capacity. But we're not really getting any add-ons or tech up at the moment, so he was either a little too premature in getting the gases out, or should have timed it out a little better and got the tech started, because there's no reason to accumulate this early in the game 300 something gas if you don't have anything out on the map that can actually be consuming this yet. So just now is adding the tech add-ons here, and you can see even after all of this production, and this is basically the maximum amount of gas that he could possibly use at this moment, and even after that was left with 150, 200 after using literally the maximum amount that he could use at that point in time. Also, by converting all your barracks at the same time to add their reactor add-ons, add their tech add-ons, he's halting his production very sharply at this one moment. So you're very vulnerable sometimes to a timing. This isn't going to hold against a large amount of lings or an initial baneling bust or anything like that. So you often want to stagger out kind of when it's appropriate to be adding these on, so that you're not leaving yourself to, okay, I get 7 troops out and then there's a minute-long gap before I bring that up to 12. You kind of want to, you're creating a timing essentially for your opponent where it's very dangerous for you to be in it. Overall, worker production just throughout the course of the game has been dropping a little bit for the Terran player. He's down 11 workers over his Zerg opponent. The mules are able to make up for a lot of that, of course. However, you can be a lot closer than this. When it comes to production, there's just been a lot of gaps throughout the game. There's also key supply blocking here. Once you've got this production kind of up and running, you want to definitely make sure that you're never hitting a supply block. This is the point that you really want to have your workers putting down, say, 2 supply depots at the same time. You've got 2 barracks with reactors, 1 barracks with a tech lab. You've got tank production coming out, and very quickly you're going to have this starport starting to pump things out. All of a sudden, in a single round of production, you are able to completely use up 1 supply depot's worth of stuff. So you want to be adapting into a mode where you're getting 2 or 3 going at the same time. You also, when you send a worker in to do something, always queue it back to one of your mineral lines so that you're not just kind of caught with him idle and he's forgetting about this, obviously. These guys kind of stream in and show how not to pick off an overseer. You can see that by just attack moving in at the guy or target firing him, the guys in the front are actually getting in the way of the ones at the back. When you've got a flying unit like that, run really close to him, just get completely under it and then start firing. Very often that's not where the Zerg is paying attention, so he's not going to move it away that quickly. Just get right under it and then start firing, and you'll take it out in like a round or 2. Whereas if you've got that many troops kind of trying to chase it in, only the first 3 or 4 will fire. They're going to stop the guys behind them as they try and create an arc around it, but it's just going to move out of the way, particularly when it's an overseer and can kind of move fairly quickly. The tanks here, try not to clump them up like that, and he's got them a little bit probably too far back. You kind of want to get them optimally at the bottom of the ramp. And at this point, he's deciding to go for the push out. Notice here again, production is dropping. That on this push out, he's kind of forgotten to produce at home. We're not making any more medevacs, not making any more tanks. When these actually come out, these facilities are going to go silent as well, except for that one. And adding on production here, but all of this would kind of indicate, and I'm just going to pause it quickly to look at what he's actually attacking with and see whether this meets what we'd want to with a timing. So right at the moment that he's deciding to move out, we're going to look at his information. So he knows that there is a third going down, but he doesn't have any real idea what sort of composition is in the army. He doesn't have any real idea what the tech is going to be. He's just now seeing, okay, this creep is out to this level, and he didn't really know where that was going to be ahead of time. And we're just kind of going in blind here overall. He doesn't really know whether or not the army is bigger or smaller. You can tell by the fact that he doesn't know that there's creep in this area, means that he hasn't really scanned in a long time, hasn't sent any recon in a very long time, so he doesn't really know what he's facing, doesn't know if there's upgrades, doesn't know anything like that. And obviously the Zerg does have 2 upgrades going. So back at home, let's see if what he's doing makes sense. Is he attacking at a fairly optimal time where he's just hit some sort of apogee in production, that he's just kind of at a point that it makes sense that he's gotten a lot out of what he's invested in, and now's a good time to go. So we see that he's invested in 2 more barracks, but we haven't gotten anything out of them yet. So odds are he hasn't been paid off for this yet. So this money could be in an army if he didn't make them, but he hasn't gotten any return from it yet. So all of this investment is not currently reflected in his army. We've had the starport come out with the reactor, and we've only gotten 2 medevacs out at this point in time. So has he been really paid off on that yet? Not too well. It would be nice, probably given what he's doing and adding production here, to wait until you got to 4 medevacs or so, and that may give you a little more. We've also only got 3 tanks out at the moment. That's not really enough to be in that total one-shotting mode when a Zerg army is coming in, particularly if they had gone for any form of upgrades. You kind of want to hit a point in which they're going to be, half your tanks are going to be kind of one-shotting Zerglings coming in, and that's just not quite enough. It would take, you know, say these 2 tanks in the back, this one's getting swarmed, it would take them 2 shots to kill the individual Zerglings and so on. So not a lot of tank mass here, could probably be waiting for a little bit more. And then his last thing, he's invested in the engineering bays and invested in the upgrades starting, but hasn't gotten any yield out of that yet either. And we've even got the armory going down. So we've got a large amount of investment, literally hundreds of minerals and gas, in things that aren't being reflected in the army itself. So a lot of investments there that just isn't paying off yet, whereas if he was to say wait probably a minute or 2, he would have an army that was much more formidable than this, more than probably 2 times the amount of power behind it. So it's a bit of a suspect time that he's actually moving out. So we'll kind of play this out and see how it goes. Obviously, just looking at worker counts, he was able to catch up a bit more in worker production, but he's been so far behind the whole game that even though he's close to equal now, particularly with mules, he's just been 10 or 15 behind the entire time. So we'll watch the initial engagement. Stim there a little bit premature. He probably wasn't going to catch those mutas. Everything kind of streams in. Gets taken out, absolutely rolled over at this point, and our Terran player is just going to decide to GG out of this. So we're going to play that back a little bit and look at the effects of the positioning on this. He is good coming in and does do an initial scan to get creep out of the way. That's always good to do. Now the Zerg player can't be just seeing him and see where these tanks are, but they do see where his main marine force is. We'll slow this down. This stim definitely probably not the best idea, so that does kill a good portion. It basically eliminates his combat shields. And as these come in, the Marines, just by being off to the side, allow the Zerglings and Banelings to come in directly at the tanks, and you'll notice they've barely got any fire off on those forces as they were coming in, because they were just completely pulled off to the side. While he did scan for creep in this area, he never bothered to actually scan to see what sort of thing he would be expecting. Didn't know whether there were Banelings there, didn't know how many Lings were there, didn't know if it was Roaches, wouldn't know what this army was really at all. Also, the Zerg production is just absolutely off the hook right now. He's got 4 things that he can be producing out of. His economy is way ahead. He's got more workers on the map. He's mining from 3 bases. He was about to be hitting +2 and +1 for armor. And just overall, just absolutely in a dominating position. The supplies prior to that engagement actually looked fairly similar, but we'll look more into that as well. So as this comes in, we can see, all right, 110 to 102, that shouldn't be a very big difference, particularly since, okay, there's 8 difference in the worker production, so doesn't that mean the armies are exactly the same size in terms of supply? Well, yes, they are. However, Zerg has the upgrade advantage, and when we look at actual investment into that, you can see that Zerg has more than double the amount of gas investment into its army and more mineral investment into its army. So while these banelings are out there, they're going to be deceptively efficient in terms of their actual supply. These can do a lot more damage to the composition of the Terran army than you would think, but they're not really showing up as much more supply than you've got in the Lings. But there's a lot more investment actually pumped into these. So it's almost hiding the actual supply. Not that you're going to know this in-game anyway, but when you're looking at the game later on saying, hey, our armies were about even, what gives with that? That's kind of the reason why, that it's kind of being hidden. Also, just the direct composition of this is really good. He's got the Mutalisks in an almost perfect number for what he's dealing with. It's just enough to make sure that he can provide pressure and prevent the Bioforce from just streaming back. It's good enough to deal with 3 tanks. It's good enough to deal with 2 medevacs. It's just a fairly decent composition. He's got about 6 to 8 at the moment that actually hits. So there's a lot more investment in this army in terms of upgrades and in terms of the actual quality of it. We also see that the reinforcements are not really streaming in. So we've got a bunch of forces there, 10 Marines at least that aren't really coming down to help. We've got medevacs that aren't being rallied forward, tanks that aren't being rallied forward. We're not producing anything out of these barracks. So as this commits to the attack, which it probably shouldn't have to begin with, no attacking on that. The banelings are being used inefficiently against some tanks, but just ultimately can't really do anything. If you look at the end of this, what's kind of left, there are a lot of banelings left, but with a few tanks and with about 20 more Marines coming in behind that, again, we've got another little bit of a fight, but that just wasn't the case here. So overall positioning, reinforcement, and everything in that were lacking. Also, he just wasn't aware that that army that he was going to fight is a lot more valuable. So that would be a very tough one to win in almost any circumstances, even with really good splitting. That would have been a tall order. So overall, that's kind of what happened in the game. It was the economy being behind the entire time, hitting almost an anti-timing. He literally hit at the point that he was invested the most into the future as opposed to right now, and that just never pays off. If you've just invested a lot into the future, odds are now is not the time for you to go. Maybe you can harass, but committing to an actual attack is not really the thing you want to do. And just positioning not very good and not getting reinforcements down. So I hope that helps clarify, and I hope that was helpful to people in general. Thanks for watching again, guys.